Now listen, I don't care what anyone does or where anyone puts their you-know-what, as long as it doesn't involve kids or animals. I could care less what you want to be or what you want to dress up as. That is totally your business. But I will be damned if I'm actually going to pay someone my money to prance around in my kitchen like RuPaul with a blob of dough at midnight when you're supposed to be baking off my danishes. Welcome to my new series, Storytime in the Bakery. Grab your coffee and relax and have a listen. So don't get me wrong, I'm not stopping the recipe videos. I just did take a week off this week because I'm sort of exhausted. But I've been wanting to do a story time sort of series for a long time because I have so many stories from my decade-long bakery experience, and some of them are really funny and some of them are actually quite horrific. But I do plan to start at the very beginning with all of this so that there's some semblance of order and a timeline that you could follow. But for this first one, I have to start off with a story that is the most shocking of all my years, bakery or no bakery. This one really takes the cake. Okay, so this happened towards the end of my bakery experience because I actually sold my bakery in early 2015. So this was around the summer of 2013 because my partner and I at that time were in negotiations for me to buy out his share of the bakery. We just weren't making enough money to sustain 2 paychecks that were going to 2 different households, whereas the previous owners, they had their entire family working in that bakery, which I came to realize is actually how all of these really successful generations-owned New Jersey bakeries really thrived. They had their whole families working there. But when you are just 2 separate people and you're not married and you're both relying on this small bakery to pay you both and an entire staff a decent paycheck, well, it was just really difficult to say the least. So after 8 years of this, we decided that it was really necessary to just have one owner because the bakery just couldn't sustain 2 top paychecks like that. And originally I was the one that was going to be bought out and he was going to stay. But at the last minute he just changed his mind and decided that he wanted out instead. So okay, fine, I'll stay. I didn't really have an exit plan anyway. I mean, I thought maybe I would just go start up something else. It was at that same time that I was doing the Crumb Boss videos. So like, I just kind of thought I could spin off into another business like that had something to do with that. But when he decided he didn't want to go, it was like, okay, I'll stay. So once that deal was all said and done, I began my plans to do a major renovation of my bakery storefront and upgrade the menu by adding in some higher end pastries and cakes and just really launch this 40-year-old old-fashioned bakery into the 21st century. So I closed the bakery from, I think it was the end of July, with the intention to be just closed for 1 month. Like August was the slowest month of the year anyway, because most people in that town, like that was a kind of a wealthier town. So everybody would leave for the summer anyway. So August was like the worst month of the entire year. So it was perfect timing to do that and get it all done and then be able to reopen by Labor Day, just in time for the back to school and the holidays. So I hired a contractor, and it turned out that he worked alone and he did a great job, but he basically worked all by himself. So he did the front of the store while I tore apart the entire kitchen area. And I did a deep clean and a reorganizing of the chaos that builds up with a bakery that literally never closes. So at the same time, though, I was testing and implementing these new recipes that I planned to introduce, like individual mousse desserts and specialty cakes to roll out with my grand reopening. So I was really racing the clock. Like, my whole entire kitchen was just torn apart while I was trying to do like a million things at once. And although I had a month, it turned out to be really not nearly enough time. And so during that same time, I had a camera system installed because for all the years in that bakery, I knew how easy it was to steal from me. And I also knew that I was being stolen from because my cash registers were basically like calculators with money in them. So there was never a tracking system or any way to prove my money at the end of the day. But I always knew things were off. So I just didn't know. You know what I mean? Like I knew, but I didn't know. Like logistically, grabbing a roll of quarters out of the register in the early morning before the store was even open was really easy to do just by pressing a button and, or just grabbing a $20 bill really fast. So I just knew how easy it was for anybody to steal. And I mean, also because they were just like calculators with money in them, it could be really easy for somebody who was clever to just not ring up something and pocket the money. Like, how would I ever know? Because essentially I was just reading off of like a long receipt tape at the end of the day. And if it didn't get rung up, I would have never known. So the first thing I wanted to do was invest in a heavy-duty computerized cash register system with everyone having to sign in with their own ID before they can ring up a sale. So like it was like this whole thing. At the same time, I also got an ADT camera system with 8 cameras from the front of the bakery to the back of the kitchen. That allowed me to have remote access to view the cameras at all times just by connecting it through to my phone. Okay, so by now it's fast approaching the end of August, and it just felt like the entire renovation was never going to be done. But it finally did get done, and it was beautiful. And, not to mention, I had employees that were itching to get back to work. I was only able to pay them for a couple of weeks vacation. So being off for a month was like torture for everyone. But we finally got it all done under the wire and reopened just after Labor Day. So the way that it always worked in my bakery was that I had a full-time baker who actually came with the bakery. When we bought it, basically all the existing employees from the previous owner were still there. And this is very typical of buying an existing business. It's called a turnkey, where you basically just take over what is already running and you just go to work as the new owner. And that's kind of a strange feeling since you're basically the new kid on the block, and all the employees that were there had been there, and some of them for decades. So to walk in on the first day as the new owner and everyone else knew more about this bakery than I did, it's just a real strange experience. And well, I'll talk more about that when I go back and do the first video in the series of when I actually bought the bakery and the very first day of going to work and all that. So I'll start with that one next after this video. But anyway, this baker, let's call him Herbert. He had always had the key, and he would come in at midnight to get everything started and baked and ready for the daily 6 a.m. opening. Now I would go in closer to 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. sometimes, depending on the time of year and how busy we were. And since I was the one who would always close the store at 5 or 6 p.m., it was always a really long day for me. So the day that we got back to work after the renovation, I think it was a Monday or a Tuesday after Labor Day, and so Herbert would use his key as usual to go in at midnight to get everything going. Now, mind you, this was after we'd been closed for a month, so things were a little bit different. But I was able to watch all of this for the first time from my house. So when the front door of the bakery opened at midnight, it set off the cameras and my phone alerted, and here we go. So, I mean, I was just curious as to what I would find. As I said, it's not like I was singling him out. I mean, my intention was to kind of keep my eye on everyone every day. And, now that everyone knew there was cameras in there, though, I don't think anybody would be that blatant. So I didn't really hope to find anything. It was just a way to deter anything going forward. So these cameras also had night vision, and each one had a little red light on it. And I could tell right away that as soon as he walked through the front door of the bakery, he noticed that something was different right away, because when he turned on the lights to the kitchen, his eyes went directly into the camera. And let me just say, from a remote viewing standpoint, that was creepy. Like, he wasn't even doing anything wrong, but like just the idea of me watching people in my bakery was really weird at first. And over time it got completely normal because, you know, everybody's got security cameras, but at first it did feel kind of creepy to me. But I think Herbert was more creeped out than me because he began to walk from one camera to the next, like just looking up into them for a few seconds before moving on to the next one. It was like he was just like scoping out where all these cameras were. He was just being really sketchy, and I was like, what is up with this guy? Like, this is kind of weird behavior. But okay, for some reason he's a bit freaked out. Let him assess the situation, and then he'll just fire up the oven and get to work as usual. But then, right after he scoped out where all the cameras were in the kitchen, he started to build a barricade. The first camera, he rolled up a rolling table that we had, and he stacked up 2 garbage cans on top of it in an attempt to block the view. Like, instantly my stomach was doing jumping jacks. What in the hell was he doing? This is nuts. Then he went to the next camera and he climbed up on the bags of flour that were right underneath it. And with his big giant face in the camera view, he draped an apron over it. And now my view was blocked. Okay, at this point, I'm feeling sick. I was trembling and I just remember feeling like violated. It was the most bizarre thing to watch unfold. Like, who would do this? What on earth is he doing this for? But it gets better. Next, he shuts off all the lights. Now, remember, I mentioned there's night vision on these cameras. So at this point, it was like watching a horror movie. His beady little red eyes reflecting back into the cameras as he walked over to the last camera way in the back of the bakery. Like, we had this obscure corner behind the oven where we piled up like number 10 cans of stuff and extra bags of flour and sugar. And he climbed up again onto these bags of flour. And then he reached up like above the camera and what seemed like into the ceiling, because it was a drop ceiling, the kind where you can move the tiles to the side and see up into the ductwork and the wiring and like that. And like, I knew that he was doing that because a bunch of dust like sprinkled down in front of the camera. And then he jumped down and walked back with the camera to his back and then went into the main part of the kitchen. So at this point, remind you, he's still in the dark. He reached into the refrigerator and grabbed out a piece of dough and started rolling the dough on the table. Now, this is not the way we go about baking off what we always called the breakfast, in air quotes, which is essentially just baking off all the Danish and croissants and buns and muffins, basically everything every day to fill the store. So why is he playing with a piece of dough in the dark? It's like insane. No ovens, like he never even pulled the racks of the dough out of the refrigerator, and like nothing. He just started playing with some dough on the table. How bizarre. So I honestly can't really remember how this night ended. I think I just was really fogged by the actual fumes in my ears from feeling sick and angry. But I think eventually he just turned on the lights and then just started working as usual, because I did have another girl that would start at 2 a.m. every morning. She was my pastry cook / assistant cake decorator. And I think she realized that she was probably going to come in soon, so he'd better get back to normal. And I also think he was testing the waters, like testing the cameras by being in the dark and not knowing if the cameras would still see him. So he thought like he should pretend that he was actually working just in case. Like, I don't really know. But what I do remember is not sleeping that night. And when I went in the next morning, I didn't say anything to him or anyone right away. I just waited until his shift was almost done by like 8 or 9 in the morning, and then I pulled him aside. I had made a copy of the footage onto a CD, and I took him into the back of the bakery with my laptop and I showed him the footage. And I was just like, what on earth are you doing in the dark in the kitchen and building barricades to block my cameras? So, I mean, I just showed him all the footage and I just questioned him, and he just like watched it. And of course the convenient language barrier all of a sudden card got pulled and he suddenly couldn't speak English. But I remember he was very nervous and he was tugging on his ear to the point that it started bleeding. Like, that's how nervous he was. And so I know you're saying, wait a minute, the title of this video, like, where's the cross-dressing coming in? And I'll get there. But at this moment, this was the first day that anything suspicious was brought to my attention, because obviously I hadn't seen what was going on in my bakery while I wasn't there for the last 8 years. So this confrontation with him was more just to say, yo, this is dangerous. Like, I have no idea why you would do this, but you can't, first of all, walk around this kitchen in the dark. There's knives, there's heavy equipment, there's a back door with stairs going down and out the back door. Like, you could fall and hurt yourself. And second of all, why are you building barricades of garbage cans to the ceiling? Like, what is happening? Now, mind you, my Spanglish was pretty good at that time, so I know he understood what I was saying, if not for the actual words. Like, my vibe was literal fire. So anyway, he apologized, and in the next days, some more things actually got uncovered. I ended up talking to my girl, let's call her Maria, and I let her know that Herbert was acting really strange that first night back from vacation. And without going into too many details, I told her that I was seriously considering letting him go. I was going to tell him, that it was really due to lack of hours, not to mention with the giant renovation that I just paid for, in addition to a loan that I had to take out to buy my partner out. I would have had to start coming in at the midnight shift to do the daily bake-off myself. And, I was telling her that so to ask if she would be willing to come in earlier as well to help me out. And this is where the story started to unfold. Maria, for the first time, told me that several times when she'd been working in there at night with him, she just felt a little bit uncomfortable being alone with him in the kitchen. She said in the early hours of the morning, sometimes she just felt a little bit uncomfortable. Now, remember, these two came with the bakery. They had been working there together for over 10 years before I'd even gotten there. And so she then told me that one time she found a woman's bra in the back near the flour bags. And she first thought that it was mine, like as if I'd been in there with my boyfriend or something, getting down on the bags of flour. Lordy, lordy. But then she realized that the bra was way too small to ever be mine. So she just sort of like threw it off to the side. But by the end of the morning, it was gone. Okay, and here's the clincher. There was one morning, as usual, she would get to work around 2 o'clock in the morning, and she'd come in through the front door of the bakery, as everyone would, and make her way through to the back of the kitchen through a swinging door that separated the area where my office was and like my little cake decorating area. And she was just about to walk through the swinging door, which also had a window. But as she looked through the window, she saw Herbert bent over in the same position that like a woman would be in, as if she was putting on her stockings, and he was wearing a corset. What the actual beep? Now listen, I don't care what anyone does or where anyone puts their you-know-what, as long as it doesn't involve kids or animals. I could care less what you want to be or what you want to dress up as. That is totally your business. But I will be damned if I'm actually going to pay someone my money to prance around in my kitchen like RuPaul with a blob of dough at midnight when you're supposed to be baking off my danishes. And who knows who he was inviting up into that bakery to play dress up at midnight. Not only is it inappropriate, but that's against the Board of Health. That is just a no. So that on top of the creepy camera incident on the first day back, I made up my mind. Herbert was now Sherbert, and I now just added another 6 hours to my already 12-hour day. Before I forget to add, later on, we ended up finding a bag of women's clothes. Like, we had this utility closet where we kept the mop and the brooms and just like all this random stuff. And we found a bag full of women's clothes stuffed into the closet. I'm confident that was what he was pulling out of the ceiling. behind that one camera in the corner of the bakery. Like, I'm just almost positive it was that. So that is the story of the cross-dressing baker and how he went on to do God knows what after that. But that was the end of our relationship in that bakery and the start of some more unbelievable stories that I will get to as soon as we start way back on the very first day when I was the new owner of the bakery. That's where I'll pick it up on the next one. Thanks for listening. Comment below. Let me know what you think of this bakery story time, and we'll do it again soon. All right. See you later.